I am about to start reading Cecilia. I should know that before I start talking to you. Which is by Ming Chang. It is Cecilia. It's my first Ming Chang and I'm quite excited about it. I feel like she's my vibe for like weird women lit. I think I've got a video about that. I'll leave it in the cards above. Lots of the people that I have similar tastes to seem to like her, like Moles by Moonlight over on Instagram definitely know that she does. So I'm looking forward to giving it a go. I'm hoping, it's a novella, today's Thursday, it's like 6:30 in the evening, so I'm hoping that I will be able to finish this by tomorrow, like just read this in a couple of days. I'm trying to get back into being someone who reads consistently and actually pays attention. Like I'm still reading more than the average bear. Like I read 4 books I think in May, and one of them was the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, which is like 800 pages nearly. I will leave the live show for that because it was a big book club book. I'll leave that link to the cards above. But yeah, I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to get back into the swing of things with reading. Who knows if it will actually work, but we will begin with this creepy body based story of female obsession. Hopefully that will be a lot of fun. I went peony picking last weekend at a pick your own peony farm, and so I thought I should probably try and get them in the shot. I am 20% of the way through Cecilia by Ming Chang now. First impressions are that it is very obsessed with piss. It's definitely bodily fluids, bodily functions, kind of gross kind of writing, Tessa Moshfegh-esque, I guess. I didn't enjoy the Moshfegh I read because I found it a bit too girls coded. Like I didn't like that show either, and it kind of gave me those vibes. Privileged people being annoying, which just, I know that was the point, but I'm too annoyed by it to enjoy it. Anyway, this is not that, definitely not. She's working as a laundry cleaner person at a chiropractor's office, and this girl Cecilia, with whom she has had a past, they knew each other in the past, and she seems to be obsessed, is coming in. I'm not sure, I'm not convinced 100% on the writing yet, but hopefully it will get better. Now, I did say I was going to try and finish this today, and I didn't. It is now like 7 o'clock in the evening. I did a workout before work, a lower body strength training workout, and then I had to have a nap instantly after work because it took all of the energy that I have, which is not boding well for my London to Brighton cycle next week. Although cycling isn't as strenuous in like as short a pace of time as that was. So I've done a 4-hour cycle. I'm sure London to Brighton will be fine, but still, it worries me a little bit. Anyway, I'll go back to you when I've actually finished it, or at least I'm a little bit further through. Yesterday I cycled from London to Brighton. So obviously I didn't read anything, and I also haven't read anything from this video in the last 10 days since I started this vlog, so I definitely need to get back on that. I've taken today off because I thought I would be exhausted after that cycle, and I'm actually fine, although it is 2 o'clock now. I'm not starting this in the morning, but I felt fine then too. So I'm going to try and spend the rest of today reading as much as I can. Hopefully I will finish Cecilia and tell you my thoughts. So far, very strange, and there was a dream sequence which I didn't realise was a dream, and I thought it was going really weird, but then it became obvious that it was a dream. And hopefully I will also start one of the others. I have not been getting on with reading this year. I've barely read anything, which obviously is difficult when you make videos. about books, only want to talk to people about books, new books. But I'm going to do my best to finish this vlog soon. And I also have to read Chain Yang All Stars for my in real life book club, which is not a short book either, and that's on Thursday. So fingers crossed, good luck to me for reading as much as I can for this week and trying to finish off this vlog. But hopefully at least the very few clips I managed to get of my cycle were of interest to you. I did manage to burn myself ever so slightly. It was really hot out yesterday, really sunny, which I was not expecting because it's been raining for all of June. And I did try and put some sun cream on, but because it had been raining at the beginning of the cycle and I don't have mud guards, I felt like I was just like rubbing grit into myself, so I didn't do a particularly good job of applying the sun cream, so my forearms are a little burnt. So yeah, today we're just going to be reading and resting. Reading and resting. Cecilia. My uterus is killing me, so bear with me. But I finished Cecilia and I think it wasn't quite for me. It is about this woman who is working in this chiropractor's office, and another woman comes in, and it is someone that she knew when she was a child, when she was kind of a preteen, I think. And it brings back all these memories, and they get on a bus together and travel, and it sort of flashes back and forth. And also kind of talks about this woman's family and being, I believe, immigrants from Hong Kong in Los Angeles, but it is so vague that it's hard to know if that is accurate or not. It was a weird one. It has moments of really beautiful lyrical writing, but it is definitely no all vibes, no plot, or no plot, just vibes. It is kind of difficult to read in that way. There was, I think I said before, there was a dream sequence that I didn't realise was a dream, and now I'm not actually sure it was a dream. So I'm not sure. There was a lot of like bodily fluids and stuff, and I don't mind that. I can get into some gross stuff, but it felt kind of performative at times. It felt grossness for the sake of grossness rather than for the story. I mean, it was a story about obsession and kind of wanting to control the person with whom you are obsessed, and there were moments that were very interesting, but other moments were just a bit much. There were also moments that were a bit strange and weird in a way that I enjoyed. There was a moment with a deer on the highway, if you read it, that made me like feel actually uncomfortable, what I want in a way that I wanted from this book, like that enjoyable discomfort. But a lot of the time it did kind of just read like, I don't know, like someone who is a preteen talking about shit and piss because it's funny, rather than actually interesting in any way. I don't know, I felt like it missed for me in some parts of it, and it felt like it was for the sake of it, rather than it wasn't really doing anything. I couldn't read more into it. It was just like, I enjoy this. And of course some books are just for enjoyment, but I think I was expecting a bit more from it. I'm also partway through Only Here, Only Now, about a fifth of the way into it, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. This is set in the early 90s, in 1994, in a estate in Muircross in Scotland, and it is about a girl who is 14, she has some mental health issues, and her mother is disabled, and they live in a council estate. They're looking for a house that is actually accessible. The house that they live in now is not, and her mum gets involved with this man, and he is not the nicest, or not the best in certain different ways, although he is trying to be nice to our main character, Cora, so far. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. It feels sometimes, because she's 14, there is elements of it that feel a bit YA, although it definitely is not. There are of it that don't. It's just the style of writing a teenager, I think, is quite tricky, and I'm not sure this one is quite hitting for me. Although it is written at least partially in Scots, there's parts of it that it's heavily using Scots, even if it's not actually in Scots. And I enjoy books that are written with well, Scots is the language, but the way it's being used in this book is more akin to a dialect. I mean, the line between language and dialect is always political anyway, but it does feel a little like depression porn, or just a bit too depressing for me, I guess, at this moment in time. I'm finding myself kind of straining with it because of that. It's that kind of depression where you just don't want to do anything, is kind of the vibe I'm getting from this, and that's making me not want to read it, because it's not fun, and my brain is just not at full capacity at the moment. But I am going to Scotland tomorrow, so I guess maybe it is a worthy read, although hopefully I will have finished it by then. Okay, I have tried to film this. This is the third attempt of me trying to film this section, and I'm in Scotland in this big house because we came up for a wedding for my boyfriend's cousins. We came up for my boyfriend's cousin's wedding. That's why I'm here, but I'm trying not to be caught. I'm in like a public place, and I'm trying to do this quietly without being noticed because my boyfriend's asleep in our room, and I keep not actually filming, so this is going very well. But I'm halfway through, only now, and it is a uncomfortable read. It's told in first person, and our main character is very like anxious and also struggling a lot. It's a coming of age story set in these small towns in Scotland after like closing of mines and things, where there's no sort of financial centre and there's a lot of poverty, everyone's poor, and there is like drug abuse and violence and other things, but it's very, I kept expecting something really tragic to happen in the beginning, and it did, but it wasn't the way I was expecting. I was expecting more like viciousness and more like violence than there was, and I think it's just because of this feeling of tension and what I expect to break that tension. But really, it is a coming of age story, as I said. The character also potentially has something like ADHD or autism that isn't being diagnosed, and she's kind of slowly coming to understand that, but because of other events that have happened in her life, it is not like at the forefront, and it's also the 90s. So I am, as I said, enjoying it to a certain extent, and there is some loveliness in the writing as well. He asked me what that meant, but a feeling had started in me, a wee spoilsport feeling, small as a blazer button, which I just thought sounded lovely, but it is kind of lovely in a small way, lovely in a very like colloquial, as I said earlier, using Scots, although not actually in Scots. So I'm enjoying it, but I'm finding it difficult because it is making me feel so anxious. I've also started The Mark by an Icelandic author whose name I haven't looked up how to pronounce, so I'll leave it here, but I will look it up before I talk to you again. And this is about Reykjavik in a dystopian future, and I normally don't read dystopias, they're not my vibe generally speaking, but after reading Pink Slime last year, I was looking for more like character focused, small, quiet dystopia, and I don't think this is going to be that, but I'm going to persevere because I think the themes are quite interesting. So it's set in Reykjavik, where the sea levels have risen, so they've put a glass dome around the city to protect it, and they are also starting to do these tests of empathy, and they're calling it the mark, or being marked, and if you fail the test you have to go into psychological like treatment, and they are, if you are, places get marked, then only people who've passed the test can go in, and if you haven't or are undergoing treatment, so if you haven't taken the test you can't go into these places, and so it's making it difficult for people who won't take the test to get jobs, to get education, to get flats or places to live, and it is also really affecting young men who seem to do worse on the test until they are like over 25, and so there is kind of this building resentment among young men, and there's also talk about like drug abuse and violence, and a lot it's told from a lot of different characters' perspectives, which is why I don't feel like it will be this small story as I was looking for, but it is we are seeing from the perspective so far of some women who have experienced like gendered violence and the ways they're trying to protect themselves with this technology, but then we're also seeing from the ways that it is discriminating against other people as well, and I'm intrigued to see how it goes in terms of the way that it's discussing gendered violence and like changing worlds, and also like technology and its control of our lives, and like watching over people, like being marked, being noticed by the technology, the way that that springs up conspiracy theories, but also the way that it really does negatively affect people, and it is very like Brave New World. So I'm intrigued to see where it goes, even though it's not necessarily my normal style, especially because it's very short. So I think it should be an interesting read, at least. Hopefully this time has worked. Hello, so I am back from Scotland now, as you can see, and I did not do a particularly good job of updating you whilst I was up there. It's really hard to film when you are with someone who doesn't want to film, doesn't want to be on camera. So I am back home, and I have also thrown my back out this morning, so excuse the dishevelled the state of dishevelment that I am in. It hurts. So I'm going to do my best to talk to you about these books. I finished Only Here, Only Now, and I found it a really difficult book to read. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It is a book about a character who is very anxious. It is a book with a lot of tension in it, and it made me feel super anxious reading it. It made me feel super uncomfortable, and it was hard for me to get through being so wholly in the mind of someone who was so anxious. And I think that it did a good job of dealing with ideas of poverty and of kind of the ways of neglect and being taken for granted, and the damage that poverty does that is not always seen, the less obvious ways that poverty damages, and the kind of mundanity and relentlessness of the damage of poverty. And I think I've been thinking a lot about like sentimentality in literature and sort of tragic, poor person at the centre of a narrative, and the ways that that is kind of a caricature, kind of abused, and kind of it's not great art, and it's not particularly interesting or engaging. It is just to allow the reader to look at one's set themselves and pat themselves on the back for feeling connection to it. And so I've been coming at books about things like poverty from that perspective. But I think that this book felt like it had a lot more honesty, and would be a lot more difficult to relate to if you didn't have poverty as a background. And I think that that's a good thing. Like, it would be confronting and difficult rather than coddling and supportive. And so I think it did, that was a strength of it. But it's one that I think I'm going to have to sit with for a bit to have some proper thoughts on. The character was clearly really well defined. All of the characters were. I think if you like a character-driven book, then this would really work for you. But it is a very much meandering slice of life in terms of plot. And the writing itself was competent in that it brought to life this character's voice so well, but not particularly interesting in terms of style. I also finished The Mark, which I think I talked to you about when I started it, but I didn't talk to you about halfway through because it was a really short book, and I didn't think there was much that I could like add in the middle that would be different at the end. So, or that would be different at the end. I thought the same way through it about it the whole way through. It was in translation, and the translation was fairly simplistic. I enjoyed the way that the different voices were shown in terms of the perspective of class and the perspective of people who have the empathy, the insiders, versus people who feel like more challenging the status quo, whether they are empathetic or not. Like this sort of aggressive centrism and technocracy that was kind of being critiqued at the centre of this. And I think it's another one that I'd have to think a lot about the politics of and the point of and the purpose of, because it felt like it was critiquing that aggressive centrism, but it wasn't providing any answers in any way. Not that it needs to, but it was kind of left very open. All of the characters were difficult and flawed, and the idea of it was quite individualistic in the idea that like all of them have to be viewed as individuals, and this test doesn't really work to show anything. It was kind of showing the way that the establishment will grasp onto anything as a cure-all, and especially if it's measurable and quantifiable, and it will just be pushed through and paper over the cracks. There were some looks at like the gendered violence and the ways that this empathy is something that in this book women are better at. That doesn't give them more power, even in a world where this empathy is considered to be more important. It is still kind of centering on men, and there is this idea of male violence, and there is also this idea of the what's the word I want? The like young men who are dislocated from the world. It's kind of looking at that the kind of Andrew Tate of the world, I think, is part of what is being explored through some of the perspectives here, and the ways that they might have a point in terms of the world not valuing them, even though their way that they go about it, the way that it is pushed through these vulnerable boys who are being taken advantage of, and seen to see someone as the enemy who is not the enemy. Anyway, it was interesting, but I think fairly standard. Like, I don't think it really delved deeply into any of these topics. I am halfway through The Third Love, which I don't know if I've talked to you about yet. It is about a Japanese woman. This is translated from Japanese, and it starts with her as a very young girl in love with this like boy who is a teenager, and then they end up getting married very early on in the book, and I'm not sure about their age difference, to be honest with you, but then she also meets this older man who was janitor, and they don't have a sexual relationship or anything, but he introduces her to this idea of magic, and then she starts dreaming that she's different women through different time periods in Japan, looking at being a sex worker in the Edo period, and being something else during an even earlier time period. And there's a lot of like folklore, Japanese folk tales interwoven into it. I'm not really sure how I feel about it at the moment. I feel like, again, translation is tricky because a lot of the time it loses style. It feels quite, it's accomplished writing in terms of the fact that it's not annoying me, but it's also not particularly interesting or beautiful or a style that's engaging with the subject matter in any way in terms of the writing. But it's fine, it's very readable, but I am just unsure. There's a lot of repetition and a lot of very obvious like foreshadowing, and it seems like our characters don't know what's going to happen. Like, one bit, our characters start talking about this folk story, and then their plot continues on, and what was happening in the folk story starts happening in the plot, and the characters are like completely oblivious about it, despite the fact that they discussed it like 3 pages ago. So I'm not really sure how I feel about it, but it's short again and readable, so I will get to the end and then I'll wrap this vlog up. I've finished reading The Third Love by Hiromi Kawakami, and I didn't really like it very much. Well, it was fine. So as I said, I kind of explained to you what it was about earlier, but it turned into, it's a discussion, I think, a meditation on the relationships between men and women and sex and sexual relationships across time periods in Japan, and the way that that relates to women's work and women's power within a relationship. It touches on childcare and motherhood, and it touches on sex work and things, as I mentioned earlier, and kind of fidelity in relationships, or the lack thereof, and also different kinds of love. But it's a very short book, and I feel like it doesn't really dive into any of those with any particular detail. And in terms of the style of writing, it was very much like someone had done a lot of research about different periods of Japan and would start writing about the story and then interrupt it with like facts about that history. And obviously it made more sense than that would in a historical fiction novel, because it was from the perspective of someone dreaming themselves to be in this historical period. So it made sense that they would know stuff, but it just isn't particularly engaging to write in that manner. So whilst I thought it was okay, it didn't really interest me, and that was annoying. And that was particularly true so the first section is in Edo, and then the second section is in Heian, Japan, and that second section that's like 1,000 years ago in Japan just was much more heavy on the historical detail. It was also using a Japanese folktale of a man and woman who elope, and then when it's during a storm and they stay in this little hut that they find, and the man goes to keep guard, and then when he comes back in, she's been eaten by a demon, or potentially kidnapped by her brothers and taken home. It was using that frame for the 3 different stories, but it felt very clunky in the way that it did that, and so I didn't really think it was very good. So this vlog, I haven't got out of or improved my reading for 2024 so far. I've gone through 6 months without a favourite book, without a book I love, and that is annoying for me. I will keep going in my endeavours to read some books that I love, and we will hopefully get there in the rest of the year. There are some books I'm excited about reading coming up, so fingers crossed they work for me. If any of you have any recommendations that you think would bust me out of this reading slump, do let me know that in the comments down below. If you're new here, my name's Roisin. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.